Great things about Monday Night March, something completely different. Our next performer is Bruce Grossi in How to Build a Nuclear Power Plant. With reports of a nuclear power resurgence to supply energy for AI, Bruce will share some of his experiences in nuclear power plant engineering. One in particular. Please welcome Bruce Grossi.
Good evening. I'm here tonight to talk about nuclear power. Why am I qualified to speak to you tonight about this subject? Well, I have over 15 years experience designing and building nuclear power plants. I'm a professional electrical engineer licensed by the state of California. And I recently completed 500 hours of yoga teacher training. So how did one get started in nuclear power? Well, I got started when I was growing up in a small rural town in Nebraska. Books were my window on the world I had yet to see or experience. I read lots of science fiction, and I thought that anything was possible. I wanted to be a scientist or engineer. Even though there were no scientists or engineers in my small town, and I had no idea what they did. I thought that building an intergalactic spaceship capable of traveling at the speed of light in my parents' basement was simply a matter of time and finding the right book to tell me how. But I never found that book because it hasn't been written yet. I planned to take my first trip on my spaceship to Alpha Centauri, the star closest to our own sun, at only 4.5 light years away. I reasoned that I could get there and back, traveling at the speed of light, in only 9 years, just in time to start college. So, my ambitions were only limited by my imagination. And I never shared my ambitions with anyone, especially my parents. Better they not know I'm planning a trip to the stars. Now, what do parents do if I were to tell them that I'm building a spaceship in the basement? They'd think it was silly, and they'd cast doubt on my aspirations. I'd learned long before that dreams die when you stop believing in yourself and listen to the doubts of others. When I went to college, I never talked to my college professors outside of class, even when they said they had an open door. I would welcome people to come by. I was afraid that they might cause me to think I wasn't capable. It caused me to doubt my own abilities. Better to work in secret and be a mystery. Well, I graduated from college with a degree in electrical engineering, and I went to work for a big corporation where I hoped to design big things, big engineering projects. 4 years into my work at the big corporation, I'm sitting at a new desk. The desk isn't new, but I am. My first job in corporate engineering. I spent the last 4 years working in the field, learning how to build power plants from the ground up. I didn't really have an office, worked out in the field. The air was fresh. I was in the sun every day. But here, I'm sitting in a windowless office, white walls, linoleum floor, harsh fluorescent lighting. I share this office with another engineer who hasn't come to work yet. It's my first day on the job. I'm wearing a suit and tie, the uniform in the corporation. On my desk, I have an inbox and an outbox. All paper, no computers yet. Assignments were going to show up on the inbox with a buck slip attached. These corporate people don't call them buck slips, they call them transmittal slips. They don't have much of a sense of humor here. Or maybe a different kind of humor. Oh, look, there it is, my first assignment. It's got a buck slip from Tom, my new supervisor. It says, please handle. I look at the document. I can't figure out what I'm supposed to handle. What to do? Well, I could go ask my new supervisor for a more clear explanation, but I didn't want to do that on my first day because he might think I'm not capable. I'm supposed to be an experienced engineer. I could ask my office mate if he ever shows up. Or I could do nothing. And see if anybody follows up. He hadn't included any other clear date, due date, or expectation about this assignment. And I've learned long before that if you're given an assignment and you're not sure what to do with it, don't do anything. See if anybody follows up. If they don't follow up, how important could it be? So what to do? Well, in 1979, the 3 Mile Island nuclear disaster occurred in Pennsylvania. And as a result, all the nuclear power plants then under construction suffered delays while they tried to figure out what went wrong and apply lessons learned to the plants currently under construction. So shortly after joining the corporate engineering department, I was asked to help out the electrical engineering group supporting the nuclear power plant, designing the nuclear power plant, because they needed additional engineering support. So I was asked to come in on the weekend to help them out with this emergency work. I showed up that Saturday and immediately found a crisis. And I instantly became a hero by solving the most important problem of the day, which was to fix the copying machine so that the team could beat their schedule. Based on that success, I was asked to join the team permanently. So one of the first things you have to do if you want to design a nuclear power plant is to get on a team that's actually designing a nuclear power plant. Well, 2 years into this, working with this team, I gained quite a bit of experience. One day, I and a friend of mine, friend and colleague, Alan, were called into an emergency meeting. An engineering audit had discovered that, or alleged that a safety system design did not meet its design criteria. It's pretty serious. Someone had claimed that it would cost $250 million and take 2 years to fix. Well, the plant wasn't online yet, and a 2-year delay would be disastrous. So we were called into a meeting, 6 people, 4 senior engineers, and Alan and I, the more junior people, to figure out a solution. As soon as we sat down, the 4 senior people started yelling, talking loudly, talking over each other. Alan and I looked at each other. We were baffled by what was going on. It was our first experience in something like this. And we weren't sure what was happening. And then Alan said very quietly to me, "Just use foam." We both laughed. It would seem like a silly idea. Foam? That will solve the problem? Well, a few minutes later, one of the senior engineers who had been sitting next to Alan shouted out, "Let's use foam!" The room went silent. Heads began to nod in agreement. Yes, that was it. Foam. What? That's the solution? Well, they saved $250 million in 2 years delay. And the senior engineer got the credit. It was Alan's idea. The lesson from that was, this is how engineering teams collaborate to solve problems. I don't think this team is going to help me design my spaceship. Well, about 3 years later, the plant was finally online. And we had, an announcement was made that a new vice president of engineering had been assigned, and we were called to an all-hands meeting to hear him speak and be introduced. So he gave a talk about his background and what he hoped to accomplish. And during his remarks, he said that he would have an open door. In fact, he had an open door policy. Not only that, his door would be open every Wednesday morning from 8 to 9 a.m. for any employee who wanted to come and talk about anything that was on their minds. Well, I've heard a lot about open door. That's pretty common. A lot of supervisors will say they have an open door policy or open door. But I never heard of any scheduling a specific time of the day, on a specific day, to have an open door. That's kind of unusual. And a couple weeks later, I happened to be on his floor, and I walked by his office, and his door was open from 8 to 9 a.m. There were 3 employees sitting outside of his office waiting to talk to him. But he wasn't in his office. He was somewhere else, off-site. Well, I checked around, and I found out that he's never in his office from 8 to 9 a.m. on Wednesday morning. But his door was always open. The lesson from that was that if you have to announce that you have an open door policy, you probably don't. Well, 15 years into my experience working in nuclear, solved a lot of problems, designed a lot of systems, and I was now in charge of a team that evaluated safety issues related to the nuclear design. We had come upon a problem where the design of some nuclear instrumentation did not appear to meet its design criteria. We were trying to come up with a solution. And unfortunately, we weren't immediately able to figure out what it was. It took us a couple weeks. We were still working on it. We were getting a little frustrated because ordinarily, if you can't find a solution to a problem like that fairly quickly, it's called an unreviewed safety question. It has to be reported to the NRC. So this seemed like it to us that this was the case. But the manager we were supporting on this didn't want to do that because it's very serious. And he was hoping that we would somehow come up with a solution. And one day, I had to make a field trip to the plant. And the same day that this manager decided to call a meeting to get an update on the status of our investigation. So I sent my 2 lead engineers to go to the meeting. The next day I came back to work and I found out the meeting had been a disaster. One of the managers at the meeting had threatened to fire one of my lead engineers for reporting a safety issue. I checked around and I found out that I confirmed that that's what had happened. And the engineer had filed a claim of harassment against the manager. So that's a violation of federal rules governing commercial nuclear activities, commercial nuclear power plants. And in fact, it's also against the law to even suggest in the mind of the employee that they might be fired for raising a safety issue. Well, this rattled our senior management. It's a very serious issue. And so the senior director called a meeting to try to explain what happened, or discuss it, I guess. He got myself, my team, about a few other people, about 30 people in all, crammed into this conference room to discuss this. Except that he got up and started to explain that the manager really didn't mean to suggest at all that my engineer should be fired. Well, I knew that was wrong. That's not what happened. So I stood up. I had to make a decision in that moment about which team I'm on. All the eyes were on me. My knees were shaking, my gut was trembling, but I knew what I had to do. I told the senior director that his response wasn't good enough. You'd have to do better, and you have to take this seriously. Well, in that moment, my life changed. The meeting was ended abruptly. They hadn't expected to hear that from me. The manager involved was moved off the project to a non-nuclear job and eventually left the company. But my career in nuclear was over. I picked the wrong team from their point of view. So I had no further opportunities in management there. So that was kind of the worst day of my life because I wanted to work there. But you know, it also turned out to be one of the best days of my life because I left. I went on to do something else. and I managed to be more successful in something else than I was in nuclear. Sometimes you have to leave. So if you want to design a nuclear power plant, start with a space shuttle. Everything else is easy. Thank you.